Okay, let's talk about blanketing Maggie. I've got Maggie here. As you can see, I put her in one of the wash stalls because just like when we groom and tack her for riding, this is the safest space to work with her. It's going to keep her out of the way. It's going to keep you safe, her safe, and also the people and horses that are around you safe. So once you put her in the wash stall, if you don't already or have your blanket, you're going to grab your blanket. Any of her blankets, you're going to do the exact same way. So once you put her in the wash stall, either when you're coming out of the walker, going to the walker, grooming or tacking her for riding, or potentially taking her to turnout and needing to switch her blanket before then, whatever the case may be, she's always going to go to one of the wash stall areas for you to do that. I don't want you to try to do it in her stall. I also don't want you to try to do it in the aisle, even if someone experienced is holding her. Okay, she's most comfortable in this space, so just stick to the wash stall, please. So you'll take your blanket and you're going to put it on her just like any other horse, okay? So we're going to take our blanket and kind of open it up and then throw it over top of her in one swoop like that. We can kind of adjust it as needed to make sure that it's directly in the center of her back. Just like with any other horse and any other blanket, we're going to start from the front and work our way back, okay? It's the safest to attach the front of the blanket first. So if the horse gets loose, or even if they spook while you're handling them, even if they happen to get away from you, for whatever reason, if the front of the blanket is attached first, that's where it's going to be the most secure. So we're going to start with her chest buckles, then we're going to do her belly surcingles, and then we'll go ahead and do her tail cord. All three of Maggie's blankets will always have a tail cord because this is going to be safest for you once you get to that point and you're ready to fasten the back end of the blanket. Some of the blankets have leg straps. Most of them have tail cords, and the tail cords are really easy for horses like her who might be a little bit more sensitive to blanketing and don't necessarily want you reaching in between their back legs or over handling them or kind of fussing with them too much. So we're going to go ahead and start with the front of the blanket. It's really important that when you're working around the front of her in this area here, that you're being very mindful of how she's responding to you with her head and neck, okay? So if you're doing anything that's upsetting her, she might feel the need to threaten you out of her space. She's always going to start with pinning her ears at you. So when you're in this space sometimes, especially if you have your back turned to her, it can be kind of hard to see how she's responding to you while you're working around her. So when we are doing the front of her blanket here, you're going to make sure that even when you're adjusting the chest buckles, you're never going to turn your back to her. You're never going to kind of do anything unnecessarily, any jostling of the blanket, any moving of any of the pieces around while you're in this space. We're going to reserve that for kind of off to the side here where we can stay in a safer space around her. So as I go to reach across, okay, I'm going to kind of keep my body turned towards her like this and just reach across with my left hand to grab the snaps, and I'll go ahead and clip them just like this, making sure that they're facing in for safety, of course, so that she doesn't get caught on anything. At this point, you might be inclined to pull the blanket to the left or to the right, or kind of reach in here to adjust something. Don't do that. Wait until you moved back a little bit away from her front end. If you do need to do that for some reason, if you need to be in this space and make any adjustments, then you're going to just hold her halter like this to make sure that as you're working in this space here, even though she's cross-tied, she still has a little bit of freedom with her head and neck. So if you're right here, kind of next to her, or even a little bit underneath of her, right up in her personal space, you're just going to put a hand on her halter like that and then make your adjustments or kind of move your blanket as needed. But we want to do that as little as possible. The next thing that we're going to do is reach under and grab the belly surcingles, okay? So the belly surcingles can make her especially irritable if they are too tight. So when we go to reach across, if we notice that it might not reach to the piece where it needs to connect on the side, on the opposite side here, then we're going to just loosen it up a little bit before we go ahead and try to connect it. Just like when we put a girth on her, if something is too tight, if for some reason something is not fitting correctly and you kind of have to pull it a little bit or give it a little shimmy in order to get it into the right place, that's going to make her more irritable and then kind of force her to threaten you out of her space, which we're trying to avoid. So we'll go ahead and grab the belly surcingle, and as we do that, before we pull on it, before we do anything to potentially upset her, we're going to just make sure that it fits, and then we'll go ahead and connect it. And this one seems to fit just fine. Then we're going to do the same thing with the other one. While you're reaching across in her space here, I want you to be really mindful of your body interacting with her, okay? So if you don't have good spatial awareness, if you don't maybe realize how close you are to her, how you might accidentally be touching her with your elbow or with your hip or some part of your body that could be interacting with her while you're reaching underneath of her, then again, that could kind of force her to threaten you out of her space if she feels like you're bumping into her or kind of crowding her. So you just want to be very mindful about that and make sure that she knows that you're not doing anything unnecessarily, that you're not fussing over her for no reason. She doesn't like a lot of fussing. She doesn't like when you kind of palpate her all over too much. She doesn't like when you touch her unnecessarily. So we're going to try really hard to avoid that. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and grab her tail and pull it over top of the tail cord, okay, which is really simple and easy to do. The whole time that you're working with her from the side, it's important to keep your eye kind of on her eye and how she's, interacting with you, with her facial expressions and her body language, because she's always going to tell you how she's feeling through the front of her body before she threatens to kick, before she threatens to bite. She might kind of change her body language a little bit and pin her ears or give you a little bit of a look before she does anything that might compromise your safety, okay? Generally, she's very agreeable as long as you're being mindful of her space, as long as you're aware of how you might be interacting with her negatively without even realizing it, then she's not going to give you a hard time, okay? So just pay really close attention to your spacing, her spacing, and the environment around you. Sometimes